The unthinkable happened. Russia started invading Ukraine. Entire cities have been destroyed and millions of Ukrainians had to flee their own country. As a response, Western countries have hit Russia with a barrage of economic sanctions. And you might wonder, how will the sanctions affect the people who are living in Russia? And here, I'm not talking about billionaire oligarchs or Vladimir Putin. Here, I'm talking about the average, everyday Russian. And also, how will the sanctions affect you if you live in Europe or in the US? Those are all the questions we're going to answer in this episode of Money Talk. Let's dive in. But before we get started, please hit the subscribe button down there and activate the notification bell to never miss a new video. And also, you might notice that my voice is a bit off, not exactly the same as usual. It's because I got COVID and I'm not completely recovered yet, so sorry about that. Alright, as we could expect it, Russia will for sure be the country that is hit the hardest by the economic sanctions. And there are quite a few things we can expect. The first thing we can expect to happen right now in Russia because of the economic sanctions is a rise of unemployment. Because of the economic sanctions, a lot of Western countries are going to reduce or stop altogether importing Russian goods. And that will hit very badly the exports of Russia, because Western countries, and specifically the European Union, represent the biggest trading partner for Russia. Roughly between 38 and 40% of Russian exports go to the European Union. Because of this very important reduction of Russian exports, the Russian manufacturing activity is also going down, which means, obviously, that many people are going to lose their jobs. But that is not the only reason why unemployment is going to increase in Russia, because a lot of Western companies that are operating in Russia are going to leave Russia. Those Western companies that will leave Russia are very diverse. They can be banks, for example, Goldman Sachs is going to leave Russia very shortly. It can be consulting companies such as KPMG, or more importantly, car makers such as Mercedes-Benz that has several manufacturing plants in Russia and will all shut them down. McDonald's, which is an iconic Western company that is very present in Russia, will also shut completely operations. Actually, they already shut all the restaurants. And of course, all those Western companies that are leaving Russia or shutting operations in Russia will fire all the employees. And yet another reason why the unemployment in Russia might rise is that the Russians are panicking and they're saving most of their income. Imagine that, if your country is at war and is the target of massive economic sanctions and you're scared to lose your job, you're not gonna go out there and buy stuff. You're not gonna buy a car, a house, etc. You're gonna save as much money as possible. But that reduces the domestic demand for Russian products and services, which makes also unemployment go up. So in short, big unemployment is to be expected in Russia. Even Vladimir Putin says so. The second thing that will probably happen in Russia is inflation. A lot of it. Again, there are several reasons for that. The first one is that imported goods in Russia are going to be more expensive because it will be either unavailable or will have a very high tax on it. More specifically, goods that come from the European Union, which represents roughly 36% of Russian imports. So a lot of products in Russia that are imported goods will become more expensive now. For example, all kinds of electronic equipment such as TVs, computers, iPhones, also clothing, cars, etc. It has already been reported that the price of iPhones in Russia have doubled. But also other imported goods that come from other countries that are not Western countries, such as China for example, will become more expensive in Russia because the ruble, the Russian currency, has completely crashed. And when Russians want to buy Chinese goods, for example, it's more expensive for them because they have to change the ruble for Chinese currencies, and the Chinese currency is now much stronger than the ruble. And that is how other goods that come from countries that did not sanction Russia will become more expensive. So there you see, unemployment, inflation, and a lot of goods that are going to become very scarce, such as Adidas. The poor gopniks, they will be very sad. But to put things into perspective, Western companies are not shipping any products to Russia for the moment. It doesn't mean that Adidas, Mercedes-Benz, and all those big companies are going to abandon the Russian market. That would be crazy. It's a huge and very profitable market. In the future, Western companies are probably going to ship their goods to a neighboring country of Russia. And then they will send the goods from that country to Russia. And in that way, Western companies avoid breaking the rules and the laws of the economic sanctions. And apparently, Kazakhstan will be this intermediary country for all the Western companies to send their goods to Russia. So on the medium to long-term future, all those Western goods are going to be in Russia again. They will probably be there after a while, so they will disappear for a short time, and they will come back being a little bit more expensive. And if unemployment and inflation wasn't already bad enough, Russians will have to face yet another problem: a collapse of the financial system. The banking system in Russia is in dire straits. They're at the brink of bankruptcies, and we could already see huge runs on the bank, with very long waiting lines full of people who want to withdraw all their savings and all the cash that they have at the bank. And they are running out of cash, and they're telling to all those people that they cannot withdraw their savings. And at the same time, the Russian government issued an executive order where all the Russian population has to convert all the savings they had in foreign currencies back into rubles. Many people in Russia had savings in dollars or in euros to protect their savings against inflation. But now, well, they're screwed because they have to convert all that money into rubles, which is rapidly declining. The Russian government issued such an executive orders for several reasons. First of all, they want to increase the demand for rubles so that the rubles doesn't plummet that badly, and at the same time they want to get their hands on foreign currencies so that the government can conduct other types of financial operations. And the last nail on the coffin for the Russian population, you probably heard about it in the news, they talked a lot about it. Russia has been excluded from the SWIFT system. To make it simple, the SWIFT system is a network that is used by almost all the banks of the planet to conduct financial transactions, to move money from one account to the other rapidly and electronically. Now that Russian banks have been kicked out of the SWIFT system, it is very difficult for them to get payments from foreign countries. Now to do payments, they have to rely on faxes and phone calls, which are very obsolete and very costly and very long. And that is a huge blow for any Russian company doing international trade with foreign companies, and also for foreign companies doing international trade with Russia. But it's also very, very bad for example, Russian YouTubers or Russian freelancers or Russian entrepreneurs who got all their money or the payments from foreign countries. It has become virtually impossible for all those people to get paid. And if you want to know more about it, check out this video from this Russian YouTuber. It is very interesting and he shows very well what is happening to the average Russian. Because of that, already tens of thousands of Russians have already left Russia to other countries to be able to survive. So the bottom line for Russia: higher unemployment, higher inflation, a collapsing financial system, and less goods available. No bueno. So I think you got it. Things look pretty grim for the Russian population. Now, the real question comes. Are those economic sanctions really doing what they're supposed to do? Is all this pressure on the Russian population going to pressure Vladimir Putin to stop the war or to resign? I honestly don't know. You'll be the judge. Let me know in the comments what you think. Now let's talk about Europe. Europe is probably going to be the second hardest hit by those economic sanctions. As I said before, there is a lot of business that is made between Europe and Russia, and all that quantity of money that suddenly disappears, well, is going to have an effect on the European economy. First of all, we can also expect unemployment to rise in Europe. Not nearly as much as in Russia, but still. Unemployment will rise because all the business that is lost with Russia that again represented the very big market. Those Western companies are going to earn less money, and maybe some of them they will be in negative. They will have losses because of that huge market that they just lost. And to compensate those losses, the companies might fire people in Europe, which will create this increase of unemployment. But again, I would like to put things into perspective. This increase is going to be much more mild, it's going to be much more modest compared to the increase of unemployment in Russia, and it's going to be short term, because again, new supply chains are going to be created for those Western companies that just lost business in Russia. In Russia! My voice is going away. As I said before, those new supply chains will probably use Kazakhstan as an intermediary country to send the goods to Russia. But as you can imagine, those supply lines are not created just in one day like that. Many months are necessary to create those new supply chains. So that is why during those many months, we'll have this increase of unemployment in Europe. Actually, something else is going to hit Europe pretty hard. Inflation. The inflation will appear because many commodities are going to become very scarce. Russia was the big supplier of many strategic and very important commodities, such as oil, palladium, nickel, and wheat. If you drive a car, you may have noticed that the price of oil has gone up significantly. It's almost at an all-time high. We have to go back to 2007, 2008 to see oil prices that are that high. And since the price of oil goes up, the price of almost everything goes up because everything uses oil in one way or another. For example, if you're in the UK and you want to buy a banana that comes from Spain, well, a lot of oil was used to transfer that banana from Spain to the UK, and as a result, the price of the banana is going to go up. That is called cost-push inflation. I talk more about it here. And that goes without mentioning the price of natural gas. Heating your house, depending where you live, is going to become much more expensive now. And the EU is doing whatever they can to liberate themselves from Russian energy. But as you could see, they expect to really be liberated from Russian energy in 2030. So it's gonna take a while. And now let's talk about palladium and nickel. To make it simple, it's not exactly like that, but to make it simple, almost all the nickel and the palladium comes from Russia. We're gonna be in big trouble if we don't have palladium and nickel, because those metals are used very heavily in a lot of manufacturing processes. And guess what? Palladium and nickel are extremely important to manufacture electronic chips. Yes, again, the industry of electronic chips is going to be in a very hard situation once again. It already had a catastrophic year in 2021, which caused and had a big role to play in the inflation of 2021. And now in 2022, once again, it is going to be very difficult to issue and to manufacture enough electronic chips. And nowadays, since a lot of products use electronic chips, if electronic chips become more scarce, they become more pricey, and all those goods are going to become more pricey again. So, inflation. But something even more essential, even more important is going to become more scarce in Europe. Wheat. The main suppliers of wheat for Europe and North Africa were Russia and Ukraine. In Ukraine, of course, they will not export any wheat because they're at war, and Russia, they will not export any wheat to Europe because of the economic sanctions. And you can see how problematic it's going to be since wheat is used a lot in many foods in Europe. In Europe, for example, the price of bread has already gone up dramatically, and some people expect the price of bread to multiply by 4. Imagine that! Imagine that the next time you're gonna buy bread, you will have to pay 4 times a higher price. So, wheat is something else that will contribute to the rise of inflation in Europe. I wonder how many times I already said the word inflation in that video. Quite a few times. So, to summarize, in Europe we can expect a rather moderate increase of unemployment, but more specifically, a high increase of inflation because of wheat, palladium, nickel, and oil. Now let's talk about the United States. The United States has been very vocal about sanctioning Russia, and they were one of the first to sanction Russia. Well, it was pretty easy for them because those sanctions are more symbolic than anything else. Russia and the United States do very little business together. To give you an idea, American products represented not even 2% of Russian imports. Because of that, the consequences of the economic sanctions on the US are going to be much more modest than Europe. There will probably not be any kind of increase of unemployment in the United States, again because they almost don't do business with Russia. But what we can expect to happen in the United States is a higher inflation, for the same reasons that I mentioned before for Europe. But it's not going to be as severe as in Europe because the United States do not rely on Russia for wheat. They already have more than enough wheat to supply themselves. But they're also going to suffer because of the lack of oil, palladium, and nickel. Which is pretty good news for Joe Biden because now he can use Putin as a scapegoat for the high inflation in the United States. Look at that.
The second big reason for inflation is Vladimir Putin and gas prices. Not a joke. We've seen the price of gas go up over $1 just since he put his troops on the border of Ukraine. They went up $1.05. Big part of that reason is Putin began amassing troops along the border and then crossed.
Which is a half-truth. Joe Biden also bears quite a lot of responsibility in the high inflation. So, it's gonna be business as usual for the US. But we're forgetting about another country which could change the situation dramatically. China. China is very tempted to help Russia, and Russia would be absolutely delighted to receive that help. It would be really a salvage for them. And Vladimir Putin has been preparing that for years. He has been getting closer and closer to Russia to trade even more together, so that Russia doesn't depend on Western countries for international trade. And China is also very interested to get closer to Russia because they basically want to screw the US. But China is playing a dangerous game and they do not like that war at all. They want this war to stop ASAP. Because before the war, China could trade and be the friend of Russia, of Europe and the US at the same time, without too much problem. But now, since the war started, they have to decide. They either keep Western countries as main partners or they choose Russia. It is one or the other, because Western countries have already warned China. They told that if China helps Russia in any shape or form, there will be massive economic sanctions against China too. So if China is rational, they would of course decide to drop Russia and to keep Western countries as the main partners, because Western countries represent much more business than Russia. North America and Europe represent a much bigger market than Russia, and it's also a market that has more money and that is used to Chinese collaboration. So if China is rational, they're going to abandon Russia to not risk to lose these big Western markets. But geopolitics are far from being rational, so we can expect anything. If China gets too close from Russia, it's also going to receive a barrage of economic sanctions, which will also bring a lot of consequences to China and Western countries. So that was it for this video about the war in Ukraine. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something from it. If that is the case, a little thumbs up is always appreciated. Do not forget to subscribe, and if there is a topic you want to cover in a future video, shoot me an email to the address that is in the description below. And I will see you soon.